The president and Secretary of State Pompeo, they want to bring Iranian oil exports to zero. Can they? Will they? Will it work?
Can they? No. Will they try? Yes. I think a big part of this, and you guys just touched upon kind of the UAE-Saudi connection, is the UAE and Saudi had a bit of angst after the deal was announced that the U.S. would pull out of the Iran deal and begin to phase down a number of different transactions. I think they initially thought that that would benefit them more immediately, but then the U.S. issued those exemptions to 8 countries, allowing them to trade for an additional 6 months. So some of this does seem to be making good to the Saudis and UAE on a deal that to a certain extent benefited them more than others in the region.
China and India are the biggest buyers of Iranian crude oil, just over 1 million barrels per day combined. They need that oil.
Yes.
Do you think that they will, either on the black market or whatever it is, continue to buy oil, defying the sanctions?
So what I suspect could happen, and India's already begun calling for kind of additional consideration for some of the close allies of the U.S. to give them additional wind down time, is potentially not waivers, but they'll come up with another term to give them a wind down period, because you've essentially given them 2 weeks that took most of the industry by surprise to go to zero when there's not an immediate supplier that can just step right in and support that.
Okay, well, to be fair, I mean, listen, we interviewed Michael Pompeo back on March 12th, and he basically said we want to bring Iranian oil exports down to zero. If you listen to his words on CNBC, you saw this company. I mean, India should have seen this coming, but do you believe that Pompeo, despite his tough words yesterday, may waver a little bit on these waivers?
I think there's been some predictability issues on how the U.S. has managed its sanctions-related challenges. If you look at the situation with Iran, I mean, the U.S. has done nothing but ratchet up pressure. Just a couple weeks ago, they designated the Revolutionary Guard as a foreign terrorist organization, a branch of the Iranian government, something that hasn't been done before. That being said, I do think to actually accomplish this is a little different. Some of the banking-related transactions they attempted to shut down last summer had largely been ceased anyway. The oil transactions were different, since those were always somewhat carved out and the waivers allowed more trade. That isn't something, when you're talking the physical supply chain, the production of crude to manufacture goods and services, the condensate that the South Koreans used in the pharmaceutical industry, it's not quite that straightforward. So I think that there might be an underestimation of how easily it is for its allies to switch to another supplier. And I just don't think that May 2nd is going to be enough time.
I know. And think about the big picture here, Daniel. I mean, right now, we're in a sensitive moment in our trade negotiations with China. There's been some positive developments. There's talk about a meeting in May or June, maybe sign this big deal. This move on Iranian oil is a kind of a slap at China, right when we're in the middle of these other sensitive negotiations.
But it's not the first one. When we had issues with North Korea just about a year ago, they threatened to go after Chinese financial institutions in retaliation for supporting the North Korean regime through secondary sanctions authority. So this just becomes another issue, and I think the Chinese have become somewhat numb to different mechanisms the U.S. is using to essentially not necessarily target China, but take steps that have an adverse reaction on the Chinese market, and so they may be used to it at this point.
Quick question, if you had to lay wagers, do you believe that after May 2nd, India and or China will continue to buy Iranian oil legally, or I don't want to say illegally, it's not their law.
That's right.
But you understand my point,
yes,
that they'll continue to buy Iranian oil?
I would be hard-pressed to think that they will be at zero by next week.